imported goods during COVID-19, affecting the country's economy. The economy has grown less resilient and it's increasingly fragile as a result of the industrial sector's slow expansion.
Because of that war, Russia and Ukraine, we have also seen because they really have been two countries that are contributing towards raw materials of most of the factories. For example, wheat, a big portion of it was coming from Ukraine and Russia. So the inflation that we're experiencing is imported inflation.
The industrialization sector of Uganda's economy currently makes it up to 27.1%, but in 5 years it will be able to make it up to 35% of the GDP.
And our strategy is to make sure that in the next 5 years, the industrial sector contributes 35% to our GDP, which I think is unachievable. As you have seen, His Excellency the President almost every week is launching a factory, which I think is a good thing for our country because these factories create wealth, but most importantly, they create jobs which are much needed by our young people.
Uganda is making progress in its pursuit for rapid industrial expansion and development, and the recent data sets indicate that Uganda has approximately 5,000 operational industries across a range of sectors, with approximately 100 industries, more than twice as it has had in its heyday. However, Jinja is still Uganda's industrial hub. Manufacturing, innovation, technology transfer and development, as well as private sector development are the three programs that are closely related to industrialization in the National Development Plan 3.
As a country, I can say we are moving in the right direction in embracing the benefits of atomic energy. First of all, we use it in the medical field for diagnosis and treatment of different diseases and other complications. We use it in agriculture for improving our crop yields, produce crops which are resistant to drought, to diseases, in order to have high yields.
Radioactive sources in Uganda are used in medical, industrial, education and research, agriculture and mining fields, and currently, government developed a program to develop nuclear power for electricity generation, which needs to be embraced. According to the Chief Executive Officer, Atomic Energy Council, devices that don't emit ionizing radiations have to be regulated by NEMA. He further indicates that the Atomic Energy Council is working with NEMA to ensure safety.
That council will work with NEMA to come up with a strategy of how these tubes should be managed. Ideally, after they have been dismantled, they don't emit ionizing radiation, and therefore they move out of our scope as Atomic Energy Council. That's where NEMA has to come in to guide how they should be further managed.
In the majority of the world's energy markets, renewables have emerged as the most competitive source. Africa is no different. Its enormous potential for producing energy from sunlight, water, and biomass is just now being realized. Particularly, Uganda is blessed with a wealth of hydropower resources. The River Nile and numerous other small rivers, along with solar and biomass-based energy sources, could provide a sufficient supply of electricity for decades to come. Nevertheless, this can be accomplished by utilizing nuclear techniques to reduce risks as new, less risky dimensions are introduced by new technology.
New technology brings in new dimensions of accuracy, precision in treatment and diagnosis of diseases using nuclear techniques. So we have to embrace it because it is more accurate, it is less risky, it is more precise, and this in a way mitigates risks associated with the exposure to radiation if not properly handled.
In order to verify that all machines have permits, the Ugandan Revenue Authority will check the importation of radiation-emitting equipment.
It is easy only if we are able to follow the regulations. It is clearly stated by Atomic Energy that if you want to import such an equipment, you should first have to apply for it so that you are guided on how to go about that, such that it comes in the right way, and then your place is also assessed by the Atomic Energy Council workers, and then they guide us correctly in order to protect yourself from radiation in such a way.
As the Atomic Energy Council, we are concerned about importation of radiation-generating equipment and other devices that emit radiation. And of course, the law is very clear about the procedure. You have to notify council when you are going to import such machines. You must be licensed to use that machine. And if you act outside that procedure, then you are acting illegally. As council, we are working towards ascertaining these individuals. We've ascertained them, we've warned them, and we've advised them on the right procedure and the way to go. Many of them have changed, and we hope this practice is going to reduce. In addition, we are working with the Uganda Revenue Authority to check at the border points when these machines are entering. They should have the importation permit to be accepted to enter our country. Without that, they should be retained by URA.
Since the early 2000s, Uganda planned to integrate nuclear or atomic energy in its energy mix. Following the energy policy of 2002, which allows for the use of both renewable and non-renewable energy sources, the Parliament passed the Atomic Energy Law in 2008. This law ensures the safe application of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is listed as potential solution for addressing Uganda's energy shortage in its Vision 2040. The standard gauge railway, new cities and businesses are all planned to be powered by the nuclear energy, some of which will also be exported to nearby nations.
Both legal and informal microfinance institutions make up Uganda's microfinance industry. The formal institutions include companies that are subject to banking regulations, financial intermediaries that are not on banks but governed by the government as microfinance deposit-taking institutions, unregulated businesses that only provide credit, and your officially registered cooperatives and societies that provide for their numbers.
We intended to disseminate the findings of the National Saving Group's policy framework study. And number two, we intend to discuss and disseminate information on key government flagship microfinance programs such as the Myoga and Parish Development Model. Number three, we intend to institutionalize and the social and economic empowerment of vulnerable communities through applying environment, social, and governance principles to microfinance and saving groups. We also intend to promote the adoption of digital technologies in the microfinance sector and saving groups through sharing practical experiences and case studies.
Over 6,664 SACCOs have been established at the constituency level as this date, with 30 million being used as a resolution fund. With a strong emphasis on the complete transition of the money economy, the PDM aims at raising household incomes and improve the standards of living for Ugandans.
We think that if there is more collaboration between government and the private sector and the financial institutions, we'll be able to actually more than double and quadruple this number. So as at AMFI, one of the things that we do to ensure that this happens is to ensure that services are delivered professionally, and that we are not hearing stories that microfinance institutions are cheating people, and we do this through capacity building in different areas, performance monitoring, but also networking, which is the major reason for this conference. We are going to have quite a number of players. Everyone in this sector is going to be.
So the government of Uganda has put in place various channels which it is availing funds to the ordinary people. The ordinary people are not banked. They cannot access loans in the financial institutions, the formal ones, and therefore there is need for an avenue to address poverty in our midst through channels that are soft to the ordinary people. When you ask an ordinary person to borrow money at 20%, which is the bank rate, they definitely can't pay it back. They don't even understand it. So I'd like to pay tribute to His Excellency the President for the parish development model, which we hope will be able to stimulate production in the different parts of the country, to be able to cause increase in production in different parts of the country.
The Tier 4 Microfinance Institutions and Money Lenders Act 2016 established the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, WUMRA. According to expectations, WUMRA will boost consumers and investors' confidence in Uganda's microfinance sector, which has suffered from widespread SACCO, fraud and unethical lending practices. In light of better regulations and increased confidence in SACCOs and other microfinance institutions, the Tier 4 law will aid in streamlining the money lending industry and encourage the implementation of the best practices that will stimulate saving mobilization through SACCOs.
We want Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, UMRA, to look at what is happening. If you get this money through the PDM, what are you doing with that money? And if you get that money, what is the impact on the market? So it is important that the regulator is in place. We are not there to fight anybody. We are only there to see what is happening such that everybody is okay. We are here to stabilize the economy. Our economy right now, whether we like it or not, Professor Balunywa has said it. It is the biggest, and the biggest is microfinance. That is what we have right now. If our people have spoken, government has responded. We only need a regulator to see, are you doing what we are expected to do? Is everything moving right? And so the regulator has reason to be there with you to see what is happening.
In order to accomplish its objective of creating a conducive working environment for the development of microfinance industry, the government is cooperating closely with other agencies.
How are you doing? I'm Jerome Paul Sonko in here. This is Smart Men's Business, wherever you are. It is Monday, the 28th of November, 2022. And yet another day for you to start your day in a beautiful fashion, but in a day where you get to realize that the business that moves around the entire country is being driven around big discussions. Well, Smart Men's Business is always here daily from morning from 6:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. to bring you all that matters business. Ushering you into the business world is not something that is very easy, but well, across the world and across the entire continent, you get to realize that there is a lot of business information that is gladly there to share. Mwasuze Mutia, Karibu East Africa, habari ya leo, and good morning, of course, to every other person wherever you are, and how you're watching, where are you? Welcome on board to Smart Men's Business. Here we take you through what is making headlines from the world of business. Well, and of course, what has kick-started off the show has been the news recap, taking you back through stories that have been making headlines across the entire globe. And of course, from the Ugandan perspective, lots of information and lots of news that has actually been coming up. But of course, as we get into the second hour of the show, quick ones is that I do have the press review ahead of me. And of course, I'm also going to be looking at the Forex updates in the world of the financial markets. And speaking of which, we are going to definitely be looking at the market review as we look at the top gainers and the bottom losers from all walks of life. But of course, as we continue to take you through all the details regarding that, you will have to experience quite a number of things in regards to business information, and you should be preparing yourself as the month of November is definitely coming to an end. But if the month is coming to an end this particular week, you get to a situation where businesses have to strengthen themselves ahead of the festive season. Now, the festive season in most of the areas, some government organizations, speaking of which, not only in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, are normally giving leaves to their workers, that is holiday leaves, close to 3 or a full month of December for them to go out on holiday and then return fully in January after the festive celebrations are taking place. But on the other hand, most of the other companies, that is for the self-employed Ugandans, and of course, let's say also those who belong to the essential part of the economy. Speaking of the essential workers, health, media, look at security, these are people who are normally into working during this time. So it is very rare for you to find out that these people will be out of or off their duties during the month of December. But well, the month of December is arguably one of those months where money is being splashed left, right and center in most parts of the economy. Reason being that people are actually into holidays, family time. It is time of sharing, and everybody's actually making more of the sharing part of it. Money is into circulation, not only through different businesses, but people are buying different items. So as a business person, this particular time is when you definitely have to be very strategic with the way you run your business. Reason being that the more strategic you are, is the more chances of you making sure that you're winning and going bigger and better in the world of business. Well, besides that, let's get into more of the details regarding the market review. Let's get into the top gainers of the day, as well as the bottom losers in regards to the market review. Now, if I will definitely be giving you some of these figures of how the markets have been performing and how the which particular organization is performing fairly onto these particular ones, courtesy of the Uganda Securities Exchange. And of course, when you look at the top gainers, we do have the National Media Group. That is particularly going in from that regard with 498.62, arguably 1.53% of an increase in there. Now, looking at the East African breweries, we do have the 1,390.32 into that, and clearly giving you a positive 0.97% increase from that particular one. And well, if you have to look at that, those are some of the top gainers from the markets in there, in that particular aspect. Now, as well, if we were to look at the bottom losers in here, or the bottom performers, we don't want to call it losers, because if you're a loser, then apparently you're away from the entire performance system. But well, when we look at the bottom losers, we have the Jubilee Holdings Limited, taking in there with a slight change of negative 2.78%, then followed by Centenary with 243.50, that is negative 102%. Now the East African Breweries Limited coming in there with a negative 0.48%. So those are some of the key issues in there from that particular situation of the market updates and how they are definitely performing in that particular situation. Or if you're to follow up from the market space in Uganda, definitely from that particular situation. Well, but regarding that situation, if we were to look at that in aggregate, 5 Uganda's security exchange listed equities which participated in trading, ending with 2 gainers and 4 losers. The top gainers, like I did say, were Nation Media Group. The other was not East African Breweries. It was the Equity Bank Limited. That is Equity Bank with the 0.97% increase. Now on the losing side, when you look at the losing side, Jubilee Holdings came out last with an end price depreciation of 2.78% at 5,949.76 Ugandan shillings per share. They were followed by Centum Investment with a negative 1.02%. Now, the East African breweries did walk away with a negative 0.848%, and the Kenya Airways with a negative 0.03%. As Women recorded the highest volume of 730,700 shares, followed by Stanbic Bank Uganda with 100,000. Then the Bank of Baroda Uganda walked away with 85,200, and Uganda Clays with 74,640. Now, regarding the performance of the Uganda Securities Exchange market indices, the benchmark of the Uganda Securities Exchange All Share Index each by 1.32, that's relatively 0.11% points to close at 1,216.38. Now, that represented a one-week loss of 1.13%, a 4-week loss of apparently close to 3.72%. Now, when you look at the top gainers, apparently in this one, the performance is Nation Media Group, and then Equity Bank Limited. Then when you look at the ones on the losing side, we have Jubilee Holdings Limited, we have Centum Investments, and then we also have the East African Breweries, followed by the Kenyan Airways. On that, those are some of the companies that are apparently being listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. But well, besides that, now let's have a look at what has been happening from the Forex review. If we look at how you can purchase a dollar or other currencies, Great Britain pound, euros, the Kenyan shilling, Tanzanian shillings, and of course get to see how ready you can be in case you want to trade in the different currencies. Well, speaking of which, opening as of the buying of the US dollars, in mainly quite a number of if you have to look at the maximum figures here, if you have to look at the maximum figures on how you can buy the US dollars, is that you can buy it at 3,734.79 opening as of yesterday. Then selling is at 3,744.79. Now, the US dollar by midday yesterday had buying at 3,734.75 Ugandan shillings. Then it was selling at 3,744.75. Then on the closing, the US dollar as of yesterday, the buying was at 3,734.50. Then selling was at 3,744.50. Now, as opening today, you'll get to realize that these particular figures may not exceed more of this, or may only increase or decrease slightly. But as of selling, did close yesterday at 3,744.5, and then it had opened at 3,734.5. Well, and from the Great Britain closing of the Great Britain did open at 4,505.91. Then it closed at 4,517.97. Then looking at the euro, did close at 3,875.16, and then it did close at 3,885.54. Now, meanwhile, on the other side, the Kenyan shilling did close at 30.54 on the buying scale. Then if you're to sell, it was at 30.62 Ugandan shillings, slightly from there. In some of the, when you get to realize that some of the forex bureaus in the country will be definitely buying it at around 29.5 shillings, but now apparently here it's still at 30. Then the Tanzanian shillings closing was at 1.60, that is regarding to buy, and then the selling was at 1.60. That's it for the market updates as well as the forex updates this morning. And of course, now let's get into the press review and see what is making headlines from the world of the other print media, that is in regards to the world of business. And with me here I have the East African newspaper, I do have the Daily Monitor, and of course the New Vision. And of course, well, and of course with the Daily Monitor is a headline regarding a 4.5 trillion Uganda shillings wealth plan which has left the North poorer. How about that? Government has admitted that the multiple interventions over the past 19 years in order to rebuild northern Uganda, scarred by nearly 2 decades of the Lord's resistance army. If you remember those days of Kony and the insecurities that were happening in northern Uganda. And according to the government, these have failed to lift the population out of poverty, envisaged and left the region poorer than the rest of the country. And briefly here, there is a simple diagram clearly showing you the performance of most of the sectors, but looking at the national poverty index mainly, with poverty level 57.5%, the poverty level at the regional level. If you look at that, the northern region has the highest levels of poverty intensity with a 57.5%. This is courtesy of the Daily Monitor figures coming in from the National Poverty Index. Then also on the other hand is that the northern region bagged 2.3 trillion Ugandan shillings of funding between 2007 to 2023. So that is how much the government has so far spent in regards to that, or from in regards to funding the northern region, 2.3 trillion. Then also at the sub-region level, Karamoja has the highest levels of multi-dimensional poverty and poverty intensity at 84.9% and 64.8% respectively. Then the poverty index is above average. When you look at the indices, the incidence of poverty is lowest in Kampala with a 0.4%. Now Buganda, which is south, has 18%, and the northern Buganda has 31.5%. According to this particular report. Now also the Daily Monitor is showing that 94% border don't have riding permits. Another report coming in from Kampala City Council Authority. You can read more about that from the Daily Monitors. And as well, there is something to do with drones to deliver drugs to AIDS patients. Now crossing over to the New Vision as well, from the press review, Emyoga Funds has apparently seen SACCOs getting more 133 billion shillings. Read that and more from the New Vision this morning. Now there's also another report from the New Vision showing Reserve Bank of Uganda governor has shoot up, as it's actually hottening up this time round. How about that? You will definitely be getting more of that update as well from the New Vision, as courtesy of the press review. And speaking of which, lastly from the press review this morning, we look at the East African newspaper, as more of this particular Britain is out as East African crude oil pipeline insurer. Why? There are lots of reasons and lots of questions as to why. Many people are asking, why is Britain out of this particular race as the insurer of the East African crude oil pipeline project? The farmers financer and the World Bank affiliate IFC were deemed to have broken its own policy on funding such policies. This is according to an outlook from the East African. Then also there is a report regarding the region isolating Kenya on GMOs. We do have that report in Karibu East Africa immediately after the break, so stick around. We shall be giving you more of the details. Speaking of which countries, then also Burundi is continuing to import as more of the other countries across the region are isolating Kenya on GMOs. Now looking at the other situation, trade barriers rear ugly head again as high and varying road tolls is killing the East African community trade. Well, remember last week we did have a report whereby most of the East African community members said through the East African Business Council were actually accepting the fact that it would be better if the East African community member state had a uniform road toll to facilitate and look for effective trade within the region and transfer as well as transportation of goods and services across the region. Now there's also an outlook where gender equity factor in the Great Lakes piece may be a reason to foster growth of women in business. That is according to the East African. Well, that's it for today's East African newspaper, and an update coming in from the Daily Monitor and the New Vision in regards to the press review. When I do return after the break, we shall head into Karibu East Africa, looking at top stories from the East African region, but also having more from the SMB International News this morning. It's the second hour of your daily Kickstarter, Smart Means Business. Hope you're okay. Good morning wherever you are. I'll be returning back shortly after the break.